Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome into a new episode of Capitol View, a daily journal produced webcast. Talking state government, politics, what's going on down in Jackson. I'm your host, Brad Locke, joined by Capitol Bureau Chief Bobby Harrison down there in Jackson. And thanks for tuning in. We do this every Monday, talking about what's going on with the legislature and all the happenings. Even though the session is over for 2016, still plenty to talk about, bills to be signed, and tax cuts and budgets and whatnot to be discussed. Bobby, how's it going down there?
All right, Brad, how you doing? I'm good to be back after missing. I guess we missed last week because of technical difficulties, so it's good to be back this week.
Yeah, I think we've got them worked out, Bobby.
Yeah. Keep your fingers crossed.
Knock on wood. Yeah. I didn't know if this is real wood on this desk, but I'll knock on it. As I mentioned, Bobby, tax cuts. Governor Bryant signed the largest tax cut in state history, signed it into law last week, with those recent budget cuts kind of looming over everything, Bobby. Again, as we mentioned before, tax cuts are important to Republicans. It's kind of part of their core philosophy, lower taxes. Even that said, Bobby, it's just it's a bad look, I guess, when you've had all these budget cuts and now you're cutting taxes.
Yeah, just a couple of days before that, the Department of Mental Health announced some major budget cuts, including closing all the male chemical dependency units in the state, which the state has no beds for drug and alcohol addiction anymore, which is kind of an amazing thing if you think about it. That happened, I think, on Wednesday, and then on Friday, Governor Bryant signed the bill that will reduce taxes over about 10 years, $415 million in today's dollars. That's going, by the time the tax cuts are completely enacted, it's going to be a lot more than $415 million. But the best way to look at it is about between 7 and 8% of the total state budget is being, and not total state budget, but total state revenues being eliminated through the tax cuts that Governor Bryant signed into effect, signed into law Friday. And the interesting thing about those, Brad, if you think about it, especially the business tax cut, the Mississippi Economic Council, Mississippi Manufacturers Association, and other groups such as those have been lobbying for that tax cut for years and years and years. And he signs into law Friday afternoon. You would think that it's by far the largest corporate tax cut in the state's history. Also, you'd think there would have been a press conference and bells and whistles and a lot of celebration. But the governor signed it in his office quietly by himself, him and his staff. No one was there. There was no press conference. There wasn't even a statement released. He just sent that bill over with the rest of the bills that were signed into law Friday. There was no celebration whatsoever. So that's kind of a telling point that even though they may like that tax cut, they understand the bad optics of cutting taxes and why you have budget cuts. And also you didn't even mention, Brad, that last week also the legislative leadership, Philip Gunn in the House, the Speaker, and Lieutenant Governor Tate Reeves in the Senate announced that during the recently completed session, they spent $56 million that they didn't have. So they're going to deal with that in the coming months, or at least in the 2017 session. So there's all sorts of issues with the budget and tax cuts coming out of the 2016 session.
Yeah, I want to talk about that, a little oversight in just a minute. But Tate Reeves, Lieutenant Governor, he has said in the past that you don't want to put two. He says that one fiscal year should not lock in long-term tax policy. Basically, is what he's saying. That's how he's trying to, I guess, if you want to call it spin or whatever, or maybe that's just that's obviously what he believes, that the optics are bad, but he believes that in the long run the tax cuts will pay off. Now, they've had tax cuts in the past, Bob. And again, these tax cuts, just to recap, they'll phase out the franchise tax for businesses. They'll reduce the corporate income tax by $2 million over 6 years. Going to provide a tax cut for the self-employed. Going to eliminate the 3% tax on the first $5,000 of taxable income. But I believe they had some tax cuts a few years ago, Bobby. And obviously, the state revenue collections are lagging the past several months, and I guess it's hard to say there's been a positive impact from those. So I don't know if that's the precedent that we need to look at.
Yeah, and Lieutenant Governor Reeves makes a good point about good tax policy shouldn't be fixated on a 1 year revenue picture. That's a good point. But the
Right.
fact of the matter is that, as you pointed out, during the past 4 year term, the legislature provided all sorts of tax cuts and credits. These are more targeted than the ones that the governor signed into law Friday. The ones in the past 4 year term, total between $300 and $350 million. A lot of those were aimed at business, and I don't think it's a coincidence that since those tax cuts have gone into effect, the share of the tax burden being paid by businesses as a percentage has started to drop from a high of about 13% of the total revenue, and a few years ago to it's projected to be about 10% for the upcoming budget year. So 10%, 13% to 10% may not sound like much, but you sound like a lot, but you're talking about literally tens of millions of dollars that's being taken out of the state revenue stream, and that's beginning to have an impact. And some people believe that the tax cut signed into law Friday by Governor Bryant will just hasten that, will add to that impact, and especially for business, the business share of taxes, it would just continue to go down and place more of the burden on the income tax, and that's particularly the sales tax. And of course, the sales tax is a tax that most people view as the most regressive. It's paid by it has a larger impact on poor and low income families than the income tax or other types of taxes.
And as you mentioned, Governor Bryant was kind of low key about signing the tax cuts, and even he is not sure what the effects of all this will be. And you had the story on Sunday, Bobby, talking about the general confusion over the state budget. And what would it be? What are the main points of confusion for everybody involved?
Okay, the main point of confusion, the reason for the $56 million shortfall, or the fact that they spent $56 million that they don't have, is late in the session, the legislative leadership decided to take a pretty substantial step in changing the way Mississippi budgets to state agencies. In doing so, they were able to free up money to help with kind of offset the decline in revenue collections that you spoke about. But it's it's caused a lot of confusion because quite frankly, nobody is sure exactly what the impact of this is going to be. But what they've done is, real simply, they took 16 agencies that were paying money to other state agencies for things like rent, tech services. They pay the attorney general for the attorney general to provide them an attorney. They were paying for those types of services, and since it was just interagencies transfers from one state agency to the other, and they stopped that practice. So in stopping that practice, in theory, the Department of Mental Health won't need as much money because they don't have to pay another state agency to rent for office or buildings or building space, and they won't have to pay the attorney general for the attorney general to furnish an attorney to help them with their legal issues, and they won't have to pay information technology services to work on their computer systems and their telephone systems and whatnot. And in doing that, they said the mental health will not need as much money, and then they would pay the attorney general the money the attorney general was losing. They'd make that up from just a regular stream of revenue. But in doing that, in making that change, there's apparently a lot of different moving parts, and maybe they hadn't taken into account all the moving parts, and they're still trying to figure that out. And the result was a $56 million shortfall that is essentially about 1% of the total state budget. So they got to make that up some way. And it's compounded by the fact that the governor's already made a couple rounds of budget cuts, and so it's just going to be a complicated process moving forward to deal with the budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which starts July 1st.
The Department of Mental Health. You mentioned Buck Clark, Senate Appropriations Chair. He says that while it may appear that they've been cut $4 million, they'll actually have another $1 million to spend for this. The reasons you spoke of, but I think they've already made some like you said before, they're having to close some beds to people, and so that's their reaction to it, Bobby. So it seems like there's maybe no clarity on either side yet.
Right, and I think I wrote in the story, maybe that's way above my pay grade, and time would tell. The Legislative Budget Committee staff is very. I always found that they were some of the most professional people in the state government, and they know what they're talking about. I presume that's the advice Bud Clark's getting and making those comments. But mental health has their own budget experts, and so I'm not sure who's right. But to emphasize again, it's confusing to everybody, including the budget experts, because if that wasn't true, you wouldn't have the legislature spending $56 million more than the state is projected to collect in revenue for the next budget year.
Yeah, it's especially confusing to me, Bobby, because numbers make my head hurt. I was told there would be no math.
Yeah, me too.
Bobby, the governor still has some bills to sign. You got the bond bill. It's almost $250 million and going to impact a lot of things up our way, Northeast Mississippi. So he's set to sign that this week. Is that right?
Yes, I forget the exact date. It's not today, but it's. I want to say the deadline he has until maybe Wednesday is the deadline to sign it, and he's been signing most of the bills early, so it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't sign that one this afternoon or tomorrow. But by most accounts, he's going to sign it, even though there's been some controversy about it. Lynn Fish, the treasurer, of course, has complained that the legislature is incurring way too much debt for the state by passing such a big bond issue, and she's also complained that some of the smaller projects in the bill that help local communities is not the types of things that the legislature should be spending state money on.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode of Capitol View. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Bobby, for giving us some updates from what's going on down there in Jackson. Again, we come to you here each Monday afternoon around 2 o'clock at djournal.com. And if you miss any of it or just want to watch it again, just catch the replay right here. We'll be back next Monday. For Bobby Harrison, I am Brad Locke. Y'all have a great day. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.